March 15, 1623. Dawn still hasn't touched Istanbul. The sky is so dark it swallows the torchlight, like even fire is afraid to breathe. Inside Topkapi Palace, behind doors carved from Lebanese cedar and reinforced with Damascus iron, someone is screaming. Not childbirth, not grief. This is the sound of a mind coming apart, right in front of the world. The guards outside, men who have watched soldiers die, who have stood through executions, who think they've heard everything a human throat can produce, instinctively step back. 3 steps. One of them will write later in a journal found centuries afterward in an Anatolian estate. I have heard men die on the battlefield. I have never heard anything like that night. It was a soul trying to escape a body that had become a cage. The girl screaming is 15. Her name is Fatma Sultan, daughter of the most powerful man alive, granddaughter of a woman who once ruled an empire from behind lattice windows. 3 months ago, she was writing essays on astronomy. Tonight, she's discovering what it means to be used as political currency in her father's empire. This isn't a wedding night story. This is about a machine, cold, calculated, and unbelievably precise, built to turn human beings into tools of state power. A machine whose methods were so systematic, so deliberate, they make modern psychological warfare look clumsy. What you're about to hear was locked away for 600 years. The real mystery isn't why they hid it. It's how much more they buried that we still haven't uncovered. Before we go on, yeah, I know you're here for the story, but every view, like, and subscription to Crimson Historians is a message. You're saying, show me the history that isn't sanitized, show me the truths textbooks avoid. So let's go back to Istanbul, back to the night everything changed. The Ottoman Empire wasn't just powerful. It was the gravitational center of 3 continents. When Istanbul spoke, Venice adjusted its sails. When the Sultan frowned, Vienna lost sleep, and inside this empire, deep within the marble core of Topkapi Palace, there was a place called the Imperial Harem. You've heard of it. You think you know it. You don't. This was a parallel government, a shadow state where the Sultan's mother, wives, daughters, and hundreds of enslaved women lived under a hierarchy more intricate than any European court. Some of these women had more real authority than high-ranking male officials. But power had rules, and for the Sultan's daughters, those rules were etched into their own bodies. Fatma Sultan was born in 1606 to Sultan Ahmed I and Kosum Sultan, a woman who became one of the most influential rulers in Ottoman history, even though official records never call her that. Kosum ruled from behind curtains for almost 40 years. She made sultans. She removed them, but not even she could shield her daughter from the machine. By age 10, Fatma spoke 4 languages. She debated scholars in Persian, wrote Arabic poetry that intimidated professionals, and read Greek philosophy in the original. Court astronomers recorded that she asked questions about planetary motion years before Kepler's work reached Istanbul. Her journals, dozens of them, held notes on lunar phases, sketches of architectural ideas, and questions about time itself. One entry from December 1620 reads, "If the stars move in circles, why does time feel like a spiral? Father says I think too much for a girl. Mother says nothing, but her eyes say she knows something I don't. I wish the stars could warn me of what's coming. They didn't." December 1622. Fatma is summoned to the deepest chamber of the harem. No explanation, no preparation. Her mother is there. Kosum Sultan, who'd survived assassins, engineered political shifts, and waited out enemies with the patience of a mountain, sits perfectly straight, her face unreadable. The announcement is delivered by Gulnar Hatun, a woman whose job title doesn't exist in English. She was a specialist in psychological dismantling and had been perfecting her craft for 30 years. The decision is made. Gulnar says, voice flat as a blade, "You will marry Kara Mustafa Pasha. The wedding is on March 15. Preparations begin tomorrow. Kara Mustafa Pasha, 20 years older, a hardened commander, his face carrying scars from 3 campaigns, a man known for efficiency, for breaking things swiftly and completely." For him, the marriage was a promotion. For Fatma, it was a death sentence wrapped in ceremony. She looks at her mother. Kosum stays silent, and that silence is an answer. What followed wasn't wedding preparation. It was erasure, designed, refined, perfected, and the worst part, we almost never learned any of this. People worked very hard to erase what you're hearing now. Every time someone scrolls past a story like this because it's too dark, the erasure continues. If you believe silenced voices deserve to be heard, stay with me. Because forgetting is exactly how history repeats itself. Now let me show you what those 3 months of preparation really were. The room they took her to was called the Gelin Odasi, the bride's chamber. A lie, it wasn't a chamber, it was a laboratory. Everything inside was engineered. The walls were paneled with dark ebony to swallow light, making the room feel like it was shrinking. The carpets were so thick footsteps vanished. The windows weren't covered. They were sealed shut with wooden shutters. Only oil lamps lit the room, placed at angles that confused the sense of time. Modern psychologists who have studied the architectural plans say the lighting alone could destabilize a person's internal rhythm. Tapestries line the walls, stories of ideal wives, women who sacrificed themselves, women who obeyed without hesitation, women whose only joy came from a husband's approval. Propaganda on loop, 24 hours a day. Gulnar Hatun entered like a head mistress conducting an execution. 60 years old, face carved from Cappadocian stone. She carried a leather-bound book written in Ottoman script, no title. Inside, detailed instructions on how to break a person's independent will while keeping their body functional. 80 years of revisions. Fatma was the 18th princess to endure this version. Stand, Gulnar ordered. For 4 hours, Fatma learned the 18 postures of humility. Not simple bows. Each angle, each hand position, each tilt carried coded messages. The greeting bow, 30 degrees neck tilt, hands below the heart. I am grateful for your attention. The serving bow, 45 degrees angle, palms up. I exist to fulfill your needs. The retiring bow, full prostration. I disappear when you wish. 4 hours a day, every day for 3 months. Modern kinesiologists say these movements were engineered to create embodied submission, where muscle memory overrides conscious thought. Your mind wants to stand tall, but your body betrays you. By week 3, Fatma's body bowed before she even realized she was doing it. That was the goal. Next, they dismantled her voice. 43 words, that's all she was allowed to say. Not 43 types of words, 43 exact phrases. Yes, my lord, as you wish. Forgive my inadequacy. Thank you for your mercy. I am honored by your attention. 43 ways to exist without existing. Break the rule once. 24 hours of fasting. Twice, the reflection cell. Pitch black, barely big enough to sit. 6 hours at a time. 3 times, public humiliation in front of 300 women while concubines recited her failures. By week 5, the girl who debated scholars couldn't form a single spontaneous sentence. Twice a week came something called the lesson in perspective, and here's what that meant. Fatma, daughter of the Sultan and granddaughter of the most powerful woman in the empire, is ordered to personally serve her father's favorite concubines. Not symbolically, literally, she washes them. She combs their hair. She dresses them in the clothes they'll wear when they go to her father's bed. She feeds them by hand, like a servant attending royalty. A junior attendant who later left the palace and wrote privately about what she had seen, described one moment. The princess shook so hard while fastening the ruby necklace around Hurrem-Dija Sultan's throat that the stones rattled like dice in a cup. She cried without sound. I've never seen a human being weep and make no noise. It was like watching a ghost mourn its own death. This wasn't random cruelty. This was targeted psychological warfare with a single purpose: destroy the princess's sense of rank, worth, and identity. Teach her, deep in her bones, that even enslaved women who share her father's bed have more value than she does. By week 8, Fatma's hands no longer shake when she dresses the concubines, not because she accepts it, because part of her has stopped being there, Beneath the harem, in rooms that never appeared on official palace maps, there were replicas, exact replicas, of bridal chambers, inside them mannequins. Not simple wooden figures, but models commissioned from Venetian craftsmen who specialized in anatomical dummies for medical schools. Realistic, disturbingly realistic, 15-year-old Fatma, already breaking after months of systematic abuse, is brought to these rooms twice a week. Under the supervision of elderly women taking notes in Persian, she is forced to rehearse, to act out scenarios no child should even know exist. Every reaction is written down. Subject showed fear response. Session extended. Subject cried. Additional conditioning required. Subject resisted physically. Increase frequency of training. They were building a manual, a technical guide on how to guarantee the wedding night goes smoothly. One of these manuals was found in 2019 in the Topkapi archives. It reads like a clinical textbook, cold, detailed, horrifying in its paperwork neatness. A modern psychologist who studied it said it feels like a CA torture manual from the 1950s. Except this one was written in 1623. 7 days before the wedding, Fatma is moved to an isolated pavilion in the palace gardens. The Jelin Kosku. No one can enter. No sound from outside can reach her. Her diet is controlled by the ounce. Not for nutrition, for mood. Pomegranates, honey, almonds, goat's milk, and rare spices from Yemen. Modern chemical testing of similar historical recipes shows those spices contained mild sedatives, compounds that create a dreamy compliance, natural anti-anxiety effects. She bathes twice a day in water infused with valerian root, poppy extract, and orange blossom. Not for cleanliness or chemical sedation. The walls are covered in mirrors, Venetian glass, extremely expensive, positioned carefully so that everywhere she looks, she sees herself. Watching herself, judging herself, it twists a Sufi concept called muraqabah, observation meant for spiritual growth, into a weapon. They turn her into her own guard. On the final night, they give her a special tea. The recipe, recovered from palace medical records, includes concentrated poppy milk, crushed mandrake root, and a third substance historians believe was an early dissociative compound. The goal isn't sleep. The goal is separation, mind from body, present in flesh, absent in spirit. As she drinks, alone in that mirror-covered pavilion, surrounded by 1,000 broken reflections of herself, Fatma writes one last clear journal entry just hours before. Tonight the stars will still move. Tomorrow they will still be there. But I will not be able to see them anymore. Not truly. The girl who loved stars is about to become someone else, someone I do not know. Mother says this is what it means to be a woman of power. If this is power, I would rather be a slave with a soul. Then the fog sets in, and the girl who loved stars stops existing. March 15, 1623. Istanbul is celebrating. The whole city is alive. Parades, incense smoke twisting above the streets. Musicians from 3 continents fighting to be heard over the thunder of 100,000 voices. Inside Topkapi's grand halls, tables made of Lebanese cedar bow under mountains of food, whole roasted lambs, towers of fruit, pastries soaked in honey. Janissaries, the empire's elite soldiers, perform choreographed combat displays, their swords flashing like theater. Coins are thrown into crowds. Prisoners walk out of jails, pardoned in honor of the Union. The empire is drunk on its own glory, and in a private room, Fatma sits completely still. Court physicians watch her carefully. Their notes from that afternoon read, pulse weak, irregular, skin cold despite braziers, eyes unfocused, tracking movement poorly. Subject appears conscious but does not respond to direct questioning. Sedative tea administered as per protocol. Proceeding to ceremony. She's awake, but she's not there. When night falls and public celebrations end, the private ritual begins. The structure where the ceremony will take place was built during the reign of Mehmed the Conqueror, more than 150 years before. 3 stories, octagonal, each floor designed for a specific stage of the ritual. Fatma is led there by a line of women carrying candles through the dark gardens. The only sound is the whisper of fabric. No one speaks. At the entrance, the procession pauses. In that short silence, maybe 5 seconds, one younger attendant later swears she heard Fatma whisper something, not in Ottoman Turkish, in Greek. A prayer to Artemis, the Virgin Goddess, a prayer older than Islam, older than the empire, older than the palace itself. Lady of the Moon, if you can hear me, let me die before dawn. Then they go inside. 3 hours of bathing in steaming water, scented with Damascus rose, jasmine, sandalwood, and Somali amber. The oils rubbed into her skin weren't just perfume. Modern forensic tests on similar mixtures show they contain diluted opium derivatives, drugs that create what doctors now call dissociative euphoria, where the body continues to move but the conscious mind retreats into a waking dream. The goal, a body that stops fighting, even if the mind is silently screaming. One attendant wrote, "The princess did not struggle, she did not react. Her eyes were open, but she did not see us. It was like washing a beautiful corpse. They dress her. White silk embroidered with gold, pearls from the Persian Gulf, a crown so heavy it physically forces her head down, but hidden under all that beauty, internal cords binding her torso, making deep breaths difficult. Closures designed so that the dress can't be easily removed without help. Weighted jewelry that functions like soft restraints. Shoes with thick, unsteady soles that make running almost impossible. The wedding dress is a prison disguised as luxury. Meanwhile, in another chamber, Kara Mustafa Pasha is receiving his own education. Senior military officers, men who have led campaigns and crushed revolt, coach him on which phrases to use to assert dominance, where to stand, how to move, how to intimidate. These are battlefield methods repurposed. He's not being trained for love. He's being trained for conquest. The ritual itself has a name. Ziyafat-i Zifaf. They called it the Ascension. The walls of the room are covered with tapestries of war. Captured cities, burning fortresses, defeated princes, princesses taken as war prizes. The message is direct. What happens in war will happen here. The bed is fitted with hidden rope mechanisms for safety. Cushions are soaked with sedative oils. The lighting is controlled down to the angle of each lamp to maximize psychological pressure. Behind carved wooden screens stand witnesses, physicians and scribes. Their job is to record that the marriage was consummated, to verify the machine did its work, the doors close. What happens next is preserved in encrypted medical notes, written in Persian and sealed for over 6 centuries. I'm going to tell you what they say, not for shock value, because covering up what was done to these girls is exactly what the empire wanted, and we are not going to help that erasure succeed. The physicians documented complete physical and psychological breakdown within the first hour. Subject's body exhibited severe tremors. Speech ceased completely. No sound produced despite apparent attempts to vocalize. Eyes rolled upward. Consciousness seemed to alternate between presence and absence. The primary male participant at first misread her condition as defiance and used the recommended intimidation techniques, but there was no active resistance, not because she submitted, because she was no longer fully there. After 3 hours of failed attempts at consummation, more sedatives were administered. Physical consummation was finally recorded only after the subject entered what the physicians called shock state, a condition where the body keeps functioning while conscious awareness seems to fully withdraw. In modern psychology, we call this dissociative shutdown. It's what the mind does when trauma becomes so overwhelming that staying conscious feels like a threat. The mind abandons the body in an attempt to protect itself, even though that protection is an illusion. The last medical note, written near dawn, internal injuries present, repeated loss of consciousness observed, subject's pulse dangerously weak. Events of this night cannot be classified as a wedding night. They are better described as ruhan sikmasi, the departure of the soul, consummation achieved, marriage sealed, physical body remains viable. The person who entered this chamber did not survive. When morning came, Istanbul celebrated a successful royal wedding. Coins tossed to the crowds, blessings recited in mosques, poems praising the union. In the pavilion, Fatma sat in silence, staring at nothing. The girl had died. Her body stayed alive for 29 more years, but the person named Fatma was gone. I want you to stop for a second. What you just heard isn't a horror story I made up. It's not exaggerated. It's drawn from medical notes, architectural plans, and witness accounts. These girls were real. Their pain was real, and for 600 years, that pain was intentionally buried. What matters right now is that you're still here, that you didn't scroll away because it was too much. If you've made it this far, you already understand. History isn't supposed to make you comfortable. It's supposed to make you conscious. Subscribe to Crimson Historians, not for me, but for every Fatma whose story almost disappeared. Because that night was only the beginning. The years that followed exposed something even more complicated. The morning after the wedding, palace physicians were disturbed, not because the process failed, because it worked too well. Fatma had developed what they clinically labeled selective mutism. She didn't talk at all. When ordered to speak by Gulnar Hatun or her husband, she responded only in barely audible whispers, using just those same 43 permitted phrases. No spontaneous speech, no questions, no independent words. Her appetite vanished. Attendants had to feed her like a baby, placing food in her mouth, massaging her throat to make her swallow. Then came the episodes. Without warning, Fatma would burst into silent tears, shaking for hours. Her whole body sobbed, but no sound came out. Witnesses said it looked like watching someone drown in open air. Worse than the crying was the fear. Any man's presence any month triggered what the doctors called fear sickness. A eunuch she'd known all her life would walk into the room, and she'd immediately start hyperventilating, sweating, and sometimes collapse outright. Her own father could no longer be in the same room with her. Guard rotations had to be rewritten, male servants removed, her entire environment rebuilt around one thing, her overwhelming, body-crushing terror of male presence. The physicians tried everything they knew. Herbal treatments, music therapy, Sufi spiritual practices, strange experimental methods with magnets and special diets. And still, the girl who once asked the stars questions had nothing left to say. Nothing worked, because you can't fix a shattered mind by tending only to the body. The girl who once filled journals with notes about the stars left those journals locked in a chest, never opened again. Her calligraphy tools, once instruments that turned ink into art so beautiful it intimidated court poet, sat untouched. She refused to enter the gardens she used to explore with childlike joy. Piece by piece, every part of who she had been was erased. Fatma's marriage to Kara Mustafa Pasha continued only on paper. She had 4 children, each conceived during encounters the medical records describe with the same cold detachment used for livestock. Subject entered dissociative state, consummation achieved, subject unresponsive for hours afterward. 4 children born from a mother who wasn't truly present at their conception. There were public events, receptions, ceremonies, where Fatma stood silent, still, polished like a porcelain doll. She wore whatever they dressed her in. She moved only when someone physically positioned her. It was the illusion of normalcy, but just for politics. Private records from palace staff tell a different truth. Kara Mustafa Pasha spent more and more time away on military campaigns. He turned to opium and then to other women. Some accounts say he repeatedly asked for assignments on the most dangerous frontiers: Hungary, Persia, Yemen. A letter discovered in Austrian archives, written to a fellow soldier, reads, "They gave me a bride and called it a reward. What they gave me was a ghost wearing a crown. I cannot look at her without seeing what I was forced to do. Send me to the frontier. Send me anywhere. Let me die in battle." Like a soldier, not in shame like a coward. He was haunted. She was destroyed, and the empire called it a successful marriage. Fatma lived 29 more years in this half-life, an ornament, a vessel for political heirs, a warning about what happens when you're born female in a system that treats women as currency. March 15, 1652 eggs. Exactly 29 years to the day after her wedding night, she died. The physicians listed the cause as brain fever, but the timing was too exact to ignore. Palace Whispers claimed that on that anniversary, she simply decided she'd carried the weight long enough. After 29 years as a living ghost, she finally let go. Her death received the standard ceremony, and then she was forgotten. Official Ottoman chronicles give her a single line: Fatma Sultan, wife of Kara Mustafa Pasha, mother of 4 children, died in 1652. She was noted for her piety and obedience. The brilliant astronomer, erased. The gifted calligrapher, erased. The curious, hungry mind, erased, replaced with 2 words, piety and obedience, exactly what the empire wanted remembered. Here's what stays with me about this story. It wasn't just that it happened, it's how flawlessly the system worked. The Ottoman court understood something long before modern psychology put it into textbooks. The strongest form of control isn't physical chains. It's mental conditioning that makes the victim police themselves. Where resistance becomes not just dangerous but impossible, where the mind refuses to allow it. They built a machine, a perfectly engineered system for breaking human autonomy, one that ran for nearly 300 years with only small updates. At least 37 documented princesses went through versions of this ritual between 1530 and 1826. 37 brilliant, educated, politically powerful women destroyed with the same bureaucratic precision. And the Ottoman Empire wasn't alone. Other royal courts had their own machines. Imperial China's footbinding, sold as beauty, but built for immobility and obedience. European courts had bridal preparation, rituals historians hint at but rarely describe. Aristocratic families worldwide treated daughters as political tools with training that boiled down to breaking their will. The details changed, the purpose never did. Turn a person into an instrument. What disturbs me most isn't the brutality, it's the cover-up. The same system that shattered these women also erased them. Screams replaced with ceremonies, trauma replaced with triumph, victims replaced with celebrated wives. For 6 centuries, the official narrative went unchallenged. It wasn't until 2019, yes, 2019, that researchers finally pieced together the truth from scattered archives, encrypted notes, and forgotten journals. Think about that. How many other truths are still buried? How many voices erased before they could speak? How many royal weddings have you read about without asking what the bride actually endured? Fatma Sultan's story is a reminder. History isn't just the victories of emperors. It's also the echo of those who were silenced. It's pain powerful institutions try to bury. It's the truth that survives even when everything is done to kill it. When we recover these stories, we aren't just learning history. We're restoring humanity. We're speaking the names the world forgot. We're refusing to let suffering disappear simply because it inconvenienced the powerful. There's a quote attributed to Qasem Sultan, Fatma's mother, found in a private letter discovered in French archives. I have ruled an empire from the shadows. I have made sultans and unmade them. I survived assassins and outlasted enemies, but I could not protect my daughter from the machine I helped build. That is the price of power. You feed the machine, and eventually it feeds on you. You've just witnessed one of history's darkest mechanisms, a ritual meant to create perfect obedience that instead became systematic psychological torture. A wedding night that should have been a celebration, but became a lifelong source of trauma. A brilliant young woman who dreamed of studying the stars, forced to spend 29 years as the ghost of herself. Dying on the exact anniversary of the night her spirit was broken. If this story makes you realize how fragile humanity can be, if it makes you angry that this truth was hidden for 600 years, if you believe the voices powerful people tried to silence deserve to be heard, then subscribe to my channel. Drop a comment with the name of another royal woman whose buried story you want uncovered. Your voice decides which forgotten truth comes next. Because the most dangerous thing about history isn't what we don't know, it's what we were intentionally kept from knowing. Until next time, keep questioning what you're told. The truth is always darker, stranger, and far more human than the official version ever admits.